The gunshot echoed through the canyon as Maverick Steele's black stallion reared against the reins. Blood trickled from his shoulder where the rustler's bullet had grazed him. But his steel-gray eyes remained fixed on the fleeing figure disappearing into the crimson sunset. He'd lost them again the third time this month. Someone had tried to steal his prize cattle. "Damn it all to hell," he muttered, pressing his bandana against the wound. The sprawling steel ranch stretched for miles around him, worth more gold than most men saw in 10 lifetimes. But lately it felt more like a target painted on his back than a blessing. As darkness crept across the Colorado territory, Maverick guided his horse toward his private cabin nestled in the pines, his sanctuary away from the main house where his tyrannical father ruled with an iron fist. The old man had been pressuring him to marry the banker's prissy daughter. But Maverick would rather eat his own boots than tie himself to that simpering fool. He was barely 50 yards from the cabin when he heard a woman's voice, raw with desperation, cutting through the night air like a blade. "Please, someone help me." Maverick spurred his horse forward, his hand instinctively moving to his Colt .45. In the flickering moonlight, saw her, a young woman stumbling through the undergrowth, her dress torn and muddy, auburn hair wild around her shoulders. She looked up at him with eyes the color of emeralds, and even in her disheveled state, she was the most beautiful creature he'd ever laid eyes on. "Ma'am, what's your trouble?" He dismounted quickly, despite the burning pain in his shoulder. Her voice broke as the words tumbled out. "I lost my son today. The river ... It swept him away during the crossing. Been searching since dawn. But ... She collapsed to her knees, her whole body shaking. "Can I stay in your cabin for one night? I have nowhere else to go. I'll work for my keep. I swear it." Maverick felt something twist in his chest. He'd seen plenty of broken souls in his 28 years, but this woman's anguish hit him like a physical blow. "Of course. Here, let me help you up." As he lifted her to her feet, he caught her scent wildflowers and wood smoke beneath the grime of her desperate search. Her skin was soft as silk under his calloused hands, and when she looked up at him with those tear-filled green eyes, something fundamental shifted inside him. "What's your name?" he asked gently. "Cordelia Thorne," she whispered. "And you?" "Steele. This is my land." He gestured toward the cabin. "Let's get you inside. You look half frozen." As they walked toward the warm glow of the windows, Cordelia stumbled again. Without thinking, Maverick swept her up in his arms, ignoring the fire in his wounded shoulder. She felt perfect against his chest, like she belonged there. "I can walk," she protested weakly. "Not tonight, you can't." Inside the cabin, he settled her by the fireplace and poured her a measure of whiskey. She drank it down without flinching, and he found himself admiring her strength even in her despair. "Tell me about your son," he said, settling into the chair. Across from her, his name was Timothy. He was only 7. Her voice caught. "We were trying to reach my sister in Denver when the wagon wheel broke near Devil's Creek. Timothy saw a butterfly and ... She broke off, tears streaming down her face. Maverick wanted to pull her into his arms, to promise her everything would be all right, but he barely knew this woman. Still something about her called to the wild, untamed part of his soul that he'd always kept carefully locked away. "You can stay as long as you need," he heard himself saying. "No questions asked." Little did he know that this one act of kindness would change both their lives forever. Dawn broke with the sound of Cordelia's screams. Maverick bolted upright from his place on the floor where he'd slept to give her his bed. She was thrashing against the quilts, lost in some terrible nightmare, her face streaked with fresh tears. "Timothy, no! Don't go to the water!" she cried out. Without hesitation, Maverick crossed to the bed and gently shook her shoulders. "Cordelia, wake up! You're safe!" Her eyes flew open, wild and unfocused, before settling on his face. For a moment, she looked confused. Then the devastating reality crashed over her again. She buried her face in her hands and sobbed. "I keep seeing him fall," she whispered. "I keep thinking if I'd just been faster, stronger, ... "Hey." Maverick sat on the edge of the bed, his heart breaking at her pain. "This wasn't your fault. Don't understand." She looked up at him with red-rimmed eyes. "I'm not who you think I am. I'm not some innocent widow traveling to family. Maverick raised an eyebrow but said nothing, waiting for her to continue. Was running away from my husband. Her voice turned bitter. Jeremiah Thorne, the so-called respected businessman of Copper Ridge, respected enough that no one questioned the bruises or the way I flinched when he raised his voice. A cold fury settled in Maverick's chest. He'd suspected there was more to her story, but this... he hurt you. He hurt Timothy too. Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. That's why I finally ran. When he backhanded my baby boy for spilling milk, I knew I had to get us out. But the river... She choked on the words. Maybe Timothy would still be alive if I just stayed and endured it? No. Maverick's voice was steel. You did the right thing. You were protecting your son. Fat lot of good it did. She stood abruptly, pacing to the window. And now Jeremiah will come looking for me. He won't let his property just disappear. Maverick stood too, moving behind her. How long before he realizes you're gone? He was supposed to return from his business trip yesterday. He'll know by now. She wrapped her arms around herself. I've already put you in danger just by being here. Like hell you will. The words came out harsher than he intended. You're not going anywhere until you're ready. She spun to face him, eyes flashing. You don't know what kind of man he is? Jeremiah has connections, money, influence. He could destroy you. Maverick let out a harsh laugh. Sweetheart, I've got more money than God and connections that reach all the way to Washington. Let him try. For the first time since he'd found her, Cordelia's lips curved in the ghost of a smile. You're either very brave or very stupid, Maverick Steele. Probably both. He moved closer, drawn by her strength even in her vulnerability. But I'll be damned if I let any man hurt you again. Something shifted between them in that moment. A recognition, spark that had nothing to do with her desperate circumstances and everything to do with the wild beating of his heart when she looked at him like that. Why? She whispered. Why would you risk everything for a stranger? Reached up, gently tucking a strand of auburn hair behind her ear. Because you're not a stranger? I don't know how to explain it, but from the moment I saw you last night, something in me just ... knew. Before he could lose his nerve, he leaned down and pressed his lips to hers. She stiffened for a moment, then melted against him, her hands fisting in his shirt as she kissed him back with a desperation that matched his own. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard. This is crazy, she whispered against his lips. Probably. He agreed, his hands tangling in her hair. But I've never been one for playing it safe. Outside, storm clouds gathered on the horizon, bringing with them a danger neither of them yet realized was already riding hard toward the Steele Ranch. The storm that hit 3 days later brought more than just thunder and lightning. Brought Jeremiah Thorne and 6 armed men to Maverick's front door. Cordelia was in the kitchen preparing supper when she heard the horses. Her blood turned to ice as she recognized the commanding voice shouting orders in the yard. Through the window, she saw him tall, lean, and radiating the cold authority that had terrorized her for 5 years of marriage. His dark hair was slicked back beneath his expensive hat, and even from this distance, she could see the cruel twist of his mouth. Maverick, she called out, her voice sharp with panic. He appeared instantly, as if he'd been waiting for this moment. His gun belt was already strapped on, and his gray eyes were hard as granite. I see them. Get to the root cellar and don't come out until I tell you. No. She grabbed his arm. He'll kill you. Jeremiah doesn't make empty threats. Neither do I. Maverick cupped her face in his hands, his touch gentle despite the violence brewing outside. In the 3 days since their first kiss, they'd grown closer than should have been possible. He'd held her through her nightmares, listened to her stories about Timothy, and shown her a tenderness she'd never known existed. Trust me, Wildcat. I've been handling dangerous men since before I could properly hold a gun. The front door exploded inward before Cordelia could argue further. Jeremiah strode in with 2 of his men flanking him, their weapons drawn. He was exactly as she remembered, handsome in a cold, predatory way, with dark eyes that missed nothing and forgave less. Well. Jeremiah's voice was silk over steel as his gaze locked onto Cordelia. There's my wayward wife. You've led me quite a chase, my dear. She's not going anywhere with you, Maverick said, stepping protectively in front of Cordelia. His hand rested casually on his gun, but she could see the coiled tension in his shoulders. Jeremiah laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "And you are Maverick Steele? Owner of this ranch and everything on it?" "Ah, the famous cattle baron." Jeremiah's smile turned predatory. "I've heard of you, rich enough to buy anything you want, including other men's wives, apparently." "Not your wife anymore." Cordelia stepped out from behind Maverick, her fear transforming into fury. "Not after what you did to Timothy." Something dangerous flickered in Jeremiah's eyes. "Careful, Cordelia. You wouldn't want to say something you'd regret. The only thing I regret is not leaving you sooner." Her voice shook with rage. "My son is dead because I was too afraid to run before. Your son is dead because you're a careless, stupid woman who never should have been trusted with a child." Jeremiah's words hit like physical blows. "But don't worry, darling. We'll try again. We'll make sure the next one learns proper obedience." Maverick's gun was in his hand before anyone could blink, the barrel pointed directly at Jeremiah's heart. "That's enough. Now. Jeremiah didn't even flinch. "Surely you don't want to start a war over a piece of used goods." "I'm a reasonable man. Name your price." Temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. When Maverick spoke, his voice was deadly quiet. "Get off my land now." "I'm afraid I can't do that. You see, Cordelia and I have unfinished business." Jeremiah gestured to his men, who raised their rifles. "Oh, she stole something from me when she ran. Timothy wasn't property." Cordelia screamed, "Not the boy." Jeremiah's smile was reptilian. "The $50,000 you took from my safe. Did you really think I wouldn't notice?" Cordelia's face went white. I needed money to start over. For Timothy. Money that wasn't yours to take. That makes you a thief, my dear. Thieves must be punished." Maverick's finger tightened. "On the trigger, touch her, and you're a dead man. Kill me, and you'll hang for murder." "I'm a respected businessman with witnesses." Jeremiah's confidence was unshakable. "Hand over my wife, and we'll call it even." "Never," Maverick growled. Outside, thunder crashed as if the very heavens were preparing for war. The standoff stretched like a taut wire ready to snap when the unexpected happened. Cordelia stepped forward, placing herself between the two men, who were ready to kill each other over her. "Stop," she said, her voice steady despite the terror coursing through her veins. "Both of you, just stop." "Dahlia, get back," Maverick warned, never taking his eyes off Jeremiah. "No." She turned too. Face her husband, lifting her chin with a defiance that made Maverick's heart swell with pride and fear in equal measure. "You want your money, Jeremiah? Fine, but I have conditions." Jeremiah's eyebrows rose. "You're hardly in a position to negotiate, my dear, aren't I?" She glanced meaningfully around the room. "You're outnumbered and outgunned on another man's land. Kill us both, and you'll have every lawman in 3 territories hunting you down. The Steele name carries weight you can't buy or intimidate." For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Jeremiah's features. "But," Cordelia continued, "I'll come with you willingly and tell you where the money is hidden on one condition. You let Maverick live, and you never come back to this ranch." "No." Maverick's voice cracked like a whip. "I won't let you sacrifice yourself for me." She turned to him then, her green eyes blazing with something fierce and beautiful. "It's not a sacrifice if it's my choice." Before Maverick could protest further, she moved to him with lightning speed, pressing her lips to his in a kiss that tasted of goodbye and desperation and love to new to die. When she pulled away, her eyes were bright with unshed tears. "You remember me," she whispered against his lips. "Always," he breathed back. Jeremiah's harsh laughter shattered the moment. "How touching." "Very well, Cordelia. You have a deal?" He holstered his weapon and gestured to his men to do the same. "But know this, if you try to run again, I'll hunt down your cowboy lover and make sure he dies very, very slowly."
Ow!
Moved toward the door, Maverick felt something inside him break. He'd found the other half of his soul, only to watch her walk away into hell. But as she passed close to him, she pressed something small and hard into his palm. Outside, as Jeremiah's men were mounting up, Cordelia turned back one last time. "The money is buried under the oak tree by Devil's Creek," she called out. "Where my son—" She couldn't finish the sentence, but Jeremiah nodded curtly. "Get her horse," he ordered one of his men, as they prepared to leave. Maverick looked down. At what Cordelia had given him was a small brass button, the kind that might come from a child's coat. But when he turned it over, he saw something that made his blood run cold. Scratched into the metal in tiny letters were the words, "Help. Me not dead." His head snapped up, but Cordelia was already being helped onto a horse, her face carefully blank. Only the slight shake of her head warned him to stay quiet. Timothy wasn't dead. Somehow, impossibly, the boy was alive, and Cordelia was going back into hell to save him. As the group rode away into the storm, Maverick was already planning. He'd give them a head start, let them think they'd won. But then he was riding to Copper Ridge with every gun he could muster. He'd been raised to believe that a man's word was his bond. But he'd made no promises to let Jeremiah Thorne live. He found out the bastard had been lying about Timothy's death, and if he'd been keeping the boy prisoner all this time, ... Maverick smiled grimly as he headed for the gun cabinet. Jeremiah Thorne was about to learn why the Steele family had carved an empire out of the wilderness with nothing but grit, lead, and an absolute refusal to let anyone hurt what was theirs. The storm was just beginning. By dawn, Maverick had assembled the deadliest group of men in 3 territories. His foreman, Flint Cobain, arrived first, a grizzled former Texas Ranger who could track a ghost across solid rock. Next came the infamous Raven twins, Caspian and Orion, gunfighters whose reputation alone could clear a saloon. Finally, his cousin Jasper rode in from the neighboring ranch, bringing with him a small army of loyal cowhands who owed the Steele family their lives. "You sure about this, Mav?" Spur asked as they checked their weapons one final time.
"Not going up against
Jeremiah Thorne in his own territory is suicide. He owns half the law in Copper Ridge. Then we'll have to be faster than the law," Maverick replied grimly, checking his rifle's action. "That woman saved my life yesterday, and her boy is still breathing somewhere in that snake's den. I won't abandon them." Flint spat tobacco juice. "Into the dirt? Been to Copper Ridge before? Thorne's got himself a fortress. High walls, guards, the works. Built it like he expected trouble, 'cause he did," one of the Raven twins said with a cold smile. "Word is, he's been collecting enemies for years. Wife-beaters usually do." As they rode hard toward Copper Ridge, Maverick's mind raced through every possible plan. Direct assault would be suicide. They needed stealth, cunning, and luck in equal measure. But first, they needed intelligence. They made camp 5 miles outside town as the sun began to set, hidden in a grove of cottonwoods. Maverick sent Caspian ahead to scout, while the rest of them waited in tense silence. When the gunfighter returned an hour later, his face was grim. "Found the boy," he said, without preamble. "He's alive, but barely. Thorne's got him locked in. A root cellar behind the main house. Saw Mrs. Thorntushies being kept in the upstairs bedroom, bars on the windows." Rage surged through Maverick like wildfire. "How many guards? 8, maybe 10? Here's the thing. There's going to be a town celebration tomorrow night. Harvest Festival. Most of Thorne's men will be in town, drinking and carrying on. That's our window," Maverick said immediately. "We hit the house. During the festival, Jasper, you and half the boys create a distraction in town. Start a fight. Set off some fireworks. Anything to keep attention off the house. Flint, you and the others watch the perimeter. I'm going in alone." "It's like hell," Orion Raven drawled. "You'll need backup." "No. Too many people increases the chance of getting caught. This has to be quiet until we're clear." As night fell deeper, they finalized their plans. But Maverick couldn't shake the image of Cordelia trapped in that house, probably being punished for her defiance. The thought of Thorne's hands on her made him want to ride in shooting. Consequences be damned. "Easy, cousin," Jasper said quietly, apparently reading his thoughts. "She's strong. She'll survive until we get there." "She shouldn't have to," Maverick muttered. Meanwhile, in Copper Ridge, Cordelia sat in the locked bedroom, her wrists raw. From fighting against the ropes Jeremiah had used to tie her to the chair. She'd been in this position for hours. Ever since she'd tried to escape to find Timothy, The door opened, and Jeremiah entered, carrying a tray of food. His face bore fresh scratches from their earlier struggle, and his mood was foul, still playing. "The defiant wife, I see," he said, setting the tray just out of her reach. "Tell me, my dear, was your cowboy worth this? Worth more than you ever were?" she spat. Jeremiah backhanded her casually, the blow snapping her head to the side. "Such language. We'll have to work on that before we leave for San Francisco." "I'm not going anywhere with you." "Oh, but you are." "You see, I've decided Colorado has become too complicated. A fresh start in California will do us both good. Timothy, too, once he learns to behave properly." Cordelia's heart leaped. "Timothy, where is he? I want to see him. When you've earned it." Jeremiah's smile was cruel. "Perhaps after you've remembered your proper place as my wife." Outside, thunder rumbled again. But this time it wasn't from the storm. The harvest festival was in full swing when Maverick slipped through the shadows toward Thorne's mansion. The distant sounds of fiddle music and laughter provided perfect cover as he scaled the high wall surrounding the property. His heart pounded against his ribs, not from fear, but from the desperate need to reach Cordelia and Timothy. Before it was too late, the house loomed before him like a dark monument to Jeremiah's cruelty. Most of the windows were dark, but a soft glow emanated from the upper floor where Caspian had seen Cordelia. Maverick pulled out his lockpicks, grateful for the skills his wild youth had taught him, made quick work of the kitchen door. The house was eerily quiet as he crept through the hallways, his Colt .45 drawn and ready. Every creak of the floorboards sounded like thunder in his ears. When he reached the root cellar door, his hands shook as he worked the lock. The sight that greeted him made his blood boil. Timothy, alive but painfully thin, was huddled in the corner on a pile of moldy blankets. The boy couldn't have been more than 7, with his mother's green eyes and auburn hair. When he saw Maverick, those eyes went wide with terror. "Please, don't hurt me," Timothy whispered. "I've been good, I promise." Maverick's heart shattered. He holstered his weapon and crouched down, speaking as gently as he could. "Hey there, partner. I'm here to take you to your mama. My name's Maverick, and I'm going to get you out of here." "Mama." Timothy's voice cracked with hope. "Mama's here?" "Sure is. She's been looking for you everywhere." Maverick scooped the boy up carefully, feeling how light he was. "We're going to go find her right now." As they made their way up to the main floor, Timothy clung to Maverick's neck. "The bad man said Mama didn't want me anymore. Said she threw me in the river and ran away." "That bad man is a liar," Maverick said fiercely. "Your mama loves you more than anything in this world." They reached the staircase leading to the upper floor when footsteps echoed from above. Jeremiah's voice carried down the stairs, cold and menacing. "Know you're here, Steele. Did you really think you could sneak into my house like some common thief?" Maverick handed Timothy to the shadows beneath the stairs. "Stay hidden, little man. No matter what happens, don't come out until I call for you." He climbed the stairs slowly, his gun drawn. At the top, he found Jeremiah waiting in the hallway, a rifle pointed directly at him. Behind Jeremiah, the bedroom door stood open, revealing Cordelia tied to a chair, her eyes wide with fear, not for herself, but for him. "Let them go, Thorne," Maverick said, his voice deadly calm. "Your fight is with me." "On the contrary," Jeremiah smiled coldly. "My fight is with anyone who tries to take what belongs to me." "Did you enjoy playing house with my wife? Did she tell you how she screams when properly disciplined?" Maverick's finger tightened on the trigger, but Jeremiah was ready for it. "Ah, kill me and my men will burn this house down with all of us inside. They have very specific orders." "Bluffing am I? Check the windows, Steele. See how many guns are pointed at this house right now." Maverick's blood ran cold as he glanced toward the window and saw the glint of rifle barrels in the moonlight. Jeremiah had anticipated this rescue attempt. "Here's what's going to happen," Jeremiah continued. "You're going to put down that gun and walk away. In return, I'll let you live." "I refuse." "And everyone dies." "Maverick, don't!" Cordelia called out desperately. "He's lying. He'll kill us anyway. Your wife knows me so well." Jeremiah laughed. Yes, I probably will kill you all eventually, but this way, you get to live a few more minutes. Isn't hope a wonderful thing? From somewhere in the distance came the sound of gunfire. Jasper and the others were making their move. Jeremiah's smile faltered. What it was the opening Maverick had been waiting for. Maverick dove to the side as Jeremiah's rifle barked, the bullet splintering the wall where he'd been standing. Rolling behind a heavy oak dresser, Maverick returned fire, his shot shattering the lamp and plunging the hallway into near darkness. Timothy, he shouted down the stairs. Run outside to the big oak tree and wait for the man named Jasper. More gunfire erupted from outside as his cousin's distraction turned into a full-scale battle. Through the chaos, Maverick heard Cordelia working frantically to free herself from the ropes. Behind you, she screamed. Maverick spun just as Jeremiah lunged from the shadows, a knife glinting in his hand. The two men crashed to the floor, fighting desperately for control of the blade. Jeremiah was stronger than he looked, driven by years of cold fury. But Maverick had grown up wrestling cattle and breaking wild horses. The knife skittered across the floor as Maverick landed a crushing blow to Jeremiah's jaw. But the older man recovered quickly, pulling a derringer from his boot. Before he could fire, a brass candlestick cracked across his skull. Cordelia stood over him. Breathing hard, the makeshift weapon in her freed hands, that's for every bruise, every nightmare, and every lie you told my son. Jeremiah groaned, blood trickling from his scalp, but his eyes burned with undiminished hatred. This isn't over, he rasped. I'll hunt you to the ends of the earth. Oh, Maverick said, hauling the man to his feet. It ends tonight. The sound of approaching hoofbeats thundered up the drive. Jasper and the others had broken through Thorne's defenses. Within minutes, the house was swarming with Maverick's men, and Jeremiah's remaining guards were either dead or fled. Mama. Mama. Timothy's voice pierced the night as he ran toward the house. Cordelia flew down the stairs, tears streaming down her face as she swept her son into her arms. My baby, my precious boy. I thought I'd lost you forever, the bad man said. You didn't. Want me? Timothy sobbed against her shoulder. Never, 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 she whispered fiercely. You are my whole world, Timothy. I would search for you until my dying breath. Maverick watched the reunion with a lump in his throat, his heart swelling, with emotions he'd never felt before. This was what love looked like. Not the cold arrangement his father had planned for him, but this fierce, protective, all-consuming fire that made a person willing to die for another. What do we do with him? Jasper asked, gesturing to Jeremiah, who was now bound hand and foot. Turn him over to the federal marshals, Maverick said. Let him face justice for kidnapping and attempted murder. You can't prove anything, Jeremiah snarled, but his confidence was cracking. Actually, we can. Flint stepped forward, holding up a leather journal. Found this in his safe. Detailed records of every beating, every threat, every time he hurt. That woman and boy, written in his own hand. Jeremiah's face went ashen. In his arrogance, he documented his own crimes, probably never imagining anyone would dare challenge him. 3 months later, Maverick stood at the altar of the small church in Copper Ridge, watching as Cordelia walked down the aisle in a simple, white dress. Timothy, healthy and happy again, served as ring-bearer, grinning from ear to ear. Jeremiah Thorne was serving 20 years in the territorial prison. His empire dissolved and his wealth distributed to his victims. The scandal had rocked Colorado society, but it had also freed other women to speak out against their abusers. Do you, Maverick Steele, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife? The preacher asked. I do, Maverick said, his voice strong and sure. For now and always. And do you, Cordelia Thorne? Take this man, Cordelia Steele, she corrected with a brilliant smile. And yes, I absolutely do. When they kissed, sealing their union, the whole congregation erupted in cheers. Timothy hugged both their legs. And Maverick knew he'd found something worth more than all the gold in Colorado, a family built on love, crust, and the wild courage to fight for what mattered most. Outside, thunder rumbled in the distance, but this time it promised rain to nourish new growth, not storms to tear apart what had been built with love.